This one tutorial you would not want to miss. It has interesting drafting and sewing technique. If you take notes, it is a Queen Anne neckline with no dart at all. It also has an exaggerated hip part. So I'll advise you grab your popcorn, then your book and your pen, and let's get started. I've gone ahead to draw my startup line and my basic line, which is the bust point, the under bust, and the half length. On the top line, I'll go ahead to measure my shoulder measurement divided by 4. And for the neck width, I'll use 2.5 inch as the neck width. I'll be using 2.5 inch as the neck depth, but this is not really necessary. I'll come down on my shoulder by 1.5, and I'm going to make my neckline curve and connect to my shoulder slant like this. I'll quickly go ahead to make my armhole curve. I have a video on the channel on how you can create a perfect armhole curve, and I linked it in the description box. I'll go ahead to mark out my bust measurement divided by 4. I'll mark it on the bust point and on the armhole. On the under bust, I'll mark out my under bust measurement divided by 4. On the half length, I'll mark out my waist measurement divided by 4. And I'll go ahead to connect this. Placing my tape on my startup line, I'll make sure I mark out my desired neck depth, of which I'm using 7 inches, and I'll go ahead to connect it to the armhole point like this. Now on my marked out desired neck depth from the armhole, I'm going to come in by 1.5 inches. I'll connect this with a slanted line to the tip of the shoulder like this. Now to avoid any falling of your Queen Anne neckline, you are going to come down from your shoulder by 1/2 inch and you slant it like this. This slant should not get to the tip of the shoulder, I should not affect it. Now this first line is totally useless. So next thing to do, I'll go ahead to make sure my bust part measurement divided by 2. And I'm just going to extend it down a bit because it does not have a dart. You're going to be tightening this point to avoid any gapping of your neckline. And I went ahead to mark 0.3 on the both sides of the neckline. Alright, it's not up to 1 inch. The total dart should give you 0.75, so I'll connect it to the bust point like this. So you go ahead to label the shoulder and the armhole point so you do not mistake it when you have cut this out. So I'll just go ahead to cut out the Queen Anne pattern before we can work on the down pattern. So I'm done with this. I'm going to keep this aside so we work with the down pattern. So next thing to do, I'm going to close the dart, and to close this dart, I'm going to pinch up one line of the dart, place it on the other line, take your office pin and you pin it up. You'd notice that the line at that point is not straight anymore. You take your straight rule and you blend up the line so it can be straight. So I'll just go ahead to cut this out. You'd notice that at this point your pattern is no more relaxed. Now on the bust point line, you are going to slash it open. This technique is called dart transfer, and the moment you do this, your pattern will become flat. I'll be showing you how you can work with this pattern as we go into the sewing process. This is the back pattern. I've gone ahead to mark out my basic line, inserted my shoulder. I used the same neck width and I've marked out my armhole. So I'm going to be using a different neck depth for the back because the back neckline is expected to be deeper. And for the back neckline, I'm using 8.5. And if you take note, it has gone beyond my armhole curve. And if it goes like this, it's going to apply much pressure on the chantilly net and it will cause it to tear quickly. So you're just going to do this like this and connect your neck depth to your armhole curve. Do not connect it all the way to the back center because it is expected to be a straight back part and not a V kind of back part. So from the side of my desired neck depth line, I'll come in by 1.5 inches. I'm going to connect it to the shoulder with a slanted line like this. I'm going to tighten the top shoulder like we did for the front by 0.5. Now for the back part, you do not need to insert the dart, but you have to contour and tighten the back center to avoid any gapping. For the back tightening on the waistline, you go in by 1 inch, and on the neckline points, you go in by 0.5 inch. Then you go ahead to connect these 2 points together with a slanted line. This other line is no more useful. All of your measurement is expected to start immediately after this your slanted line. I'll go ahead to insert my measurement starting immediately after my slanted line. I'll measure my bust measurement divided by 4. I'll mark it on my armhole depth and on my bust point. Divide my under bust and my waist measurement and mark it out accordingly. Connect the points together. Next, I'll go ahead to indicate where the up part is, the back center, the side is. Just label it accordingly so you do not mistake it when you cut this out. So I'm going to cut this out. I'm I'm going to be indicating this part as the Queen Anne of the back, so I'll not mistake it for the front. So I'll just keep this aside. For the skirt, I've gone ahead to mark out my lines on my pattern, and I mark out my waistline. I came down by 9 inches to get my hip line. On my waistline, I'll mark out my waist measurement divided by 4. No need for that intake. On my hip line, I'll mark out my hip measurement divided by 4. So I'll go ahead to measure my full length, and I'm going to mark it out. And on the full length, I'll go ahead to measure out the same thing I measured on my hip line and connect it straight. Now, at this point, it is up to you to decide how exaggerated you want your hip to be. For me, I am using 1 inch. So I'm going to go ahead to mark 1 inch on the hip point and 1 inch on the full length. I'm going to connect this like this. Kindly note, there is no measurements or guide on how to connect your curve. Just connect your curve, and when you see that it is giving something you love, you go ahead to leave it like that. If you have noticed these styles on people's body, you notice that all of them have different curving and different slanting. So it depends on what you curve out at this point is what will determine what you will get as the curving of your skirt when you are done. You can see how I took my time, and if you have a curve rule, it will help you. But if you do not have a curve rule, just use a dotted line first. When you have achieved the curve you want, you go ahead to connect it with a bold line. So I'll just go ahead to cut this out, and I'll be using this for both the front and the back. For the back piece, I'll just go ahead to add my zipper allowance on the back center when I'm cutting that. So I'll just go ahead to cut out the sleeve, and for the sleeve, I went ahead to cut out a piece that is equal to my sleeve length. Sleeve is already on fold. On the open part of the sleeve fold, I came down by 4 inches, and I'm going to connect it with a slanted line to the center. I'm going to mark out my armhole circumference, and I'm going to make a curve like this. I have a detailed tutorial on how to cut a basic sleeve. I linked into this video. Kindly check the description box for that. I'll go ahead to mark out my shoulder to my wrist measurement. This measurement I mark is my shoulder to my wrist, not my fingertip. I'm going to come up from that point by 2 inches, and I'm going to measure my wrist measurement, which is 4. Now I'm going to be using 8 inches for the width of my flayed sleeve, and I'm going to connect it with a slanted line like this. To make my down point even, I went ahead to trim it. I went ahead to insert my round sleeve measurement divided by 2 plus 1 inch as sewing allowance. Quick question: if you remembered, we transferred the above bust tightening to our bust point, and we slashed the dart, which I called a dart transfer technique. But as you can see on our finished dress, there is no slash point on our bust point. I believe you'd want to see the interesting sewing technique I use in achieving this dress. Kindly follow the link in the description box to take you to the sewing tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.